Welcome, everyone, to Do You Even Live Here? I'm Dalton George, the co-host and Mayor of Boone, and today this is our second episode where we're talking a little bit about things going on around the state, what's going on in our lives. We don't have a guest. I really enjoyed the last format, but kind of at the start, just want to underline some of the things we're talking about today and highlight that. So we got 4 topics for today's episode. We've got HCA, which is a healthcare issue in the western part of the state. Preston's going to tell me more about it. I don't know a ton. Graig Meyer's replacement in the North Carolina Senate. At the top of this episode, I think it's important to underscore that Graig is the founder of Beacon Media, who supports this show. It doesn't inform the discussion, but I believe in that transparency of making that clear. Talking a little bit about controversies after that, controversies with us, with the podcast, how we navigate those, and a little bit about panels and the public-facing nature of our roles. And then we're going to talk about, as most North Carolinians do to wrap up the episode, March Madness. Last night, as we're recording this, was the end of the tournament with Michigan winning, so very timely discussion there. But going to give Preston a chance to introduce himself and then start off with the HCA. Tell us what's going on in the healthcare world out in Hendersonville.
Yeah. Hey, friends. Preston Blakely here. I'm mayor of the town of Fletcher, and the other half of Do You Even Live Here? Super thrilled to be here talking about all these really interesting things going on throughout our state, West North Carolina, and between both Dalton's life and my life. And to say the least, we stay busy. And, to kick things off, Falk and West North Carolina have been talking about HCA a whole lot. So I want to walk y'all through a little bit of a timeline about what happened with HCA, when it was balled out, what's happened since, because there's a lot that's going on there. And I think that history needs to be told for people to get the full picture about, what's happening in West North Carolina and why this matters so much. And so I'll walk y'all through it because it's a mission story. Again, it really just didn't start overnight. There's really a lot of building blocks over the past, I think, 6 years to get here. So back in 2018, Mission Health, which is our region's primary hospital system, was a locally run nonprofit, and they decided to sell. And by August of 2018, they reached a deal with HCA Healthcare, which is one of the largest for-profit hospital systems in the country. And that's a pretty major
shift. What does HCA stand for the people that don't know? Because I have no idea.
HCA stands for, that is a great question. It's HCA Healthcare? I don't know, dude. I actually don't know.
But it's like this medical conglomerate that buys up rural hospitals and things like this and manages them. Is that what they are?
Well, that's at least what's happening right now. I'm not sure if that's always been their business model, but that's what's happening here. And so pretty much overnight, it went from, this local control nonprofit to, this corporate control by this big conglomerate. And in January 2019, the state signs off on everything. But there's a couple conditions that are in place, right? So they need to invest in the facilities, they need to maintain services, and they need to protect rural hospitals. There's a couple of rural hospitals there's one in Transylvania County, there's out in Macon County, there's some rural hospitals. And then there's the main, really urban hospital in downtown Nashville. And then in February 1st, 2019, the deal closes. But there's a few key things that people need to realize about those protections that were put in place around, investing in facilities, maintaining services, and protecting rural hospitals. Those protections weren't permanent. And so most of them were tied between a 5 and a 10-year window. And so, when people heard that the hospitals are protected, what it really meant was that they're protected for now. And so what happened next was, things were pretty quiet. But as we turn into 2020 at the height of COVID, you're starting to see staffing shortages. Nurses were leaving. There's a lot of pressure inside the system. And then in 2021-22, the concerns started to get a little louder, where we're seeing, really long ER times. You're seeing, a big strain on healthcare workers. And, a lot of people are asking because, in this agreement, when they sold it, again, they had these protections that they were going to supposed to keep in line. So investing in facilities, maintaining services, which is a big one, of course, and protecting those rural hospitals. And people are starting to say, are we getting or asking, is this what we were promised? Is this what you all agreed to? And then things really started to escalate in a pretty dang big way. And so in 2023, the North Carolina DOJ, which is the Department of Justice, filed a lawsuit against HCA. And this is really important because, this makes this shift from like this isn't just the public saying this. This is, the institution of North Carolina protecting its constituents saying this. And they're saying that they don't think the ACA has lived up to the commitments that they promised when they bought Mission. And so essentially what the lawsuit says is that emergency wait times have increased, staffing levels are an issue, and access to care is an issue. And they're saying these conditions aren't meeting the standards that they promised when they purchased Mission Hospital. The ACA says that the healthcare shortages are part of a national issue, not unique to ACA or Mission. They're saying they're investing money into the system. They say the demand of care has increased, especially post-COVID. And, they're making the argument that they've made their legal obligations under their agreement. But interestingly enough, and I'll leave this person unnamed, but I had lunch with somebody from NCDOJ today, and they were talking about this lawsuit with me. And the argument that they framed from HCA side was interesting because they were saying, HCA committed to, maintaining this care. But they're saying like they didn't define what care looked like, which to me is like a really shitty argument to make. We're saying that we're going to provide this service, but they're not saying like the service is going to be great. And that's not an argument that I would want to make. That's a poor argument to me. And that's what this individual that works at NCDOJ was saying. And so then,
I was just going to ask, so this buyout obviously came as we've seen rural hospitals across the nation kind of pressured because of limited finances, funding from governments, all of these different things. And I know that we actually had a hospital here in Watauga County. It was bought out by the UNC health system. And some people have complained, but like, I think the UNC health system overall is a pretty good steward of this. Like it's not been anywhere near the controversy you've outlined. And so I have one question because there's so much, and I know you've got more to say. Is this a hospital? Like, if you got injured right now, would you go to this hospital? Is this like your kind of home area hospital?
Well, so it depends, right? Because there's certain services that only Mission provides. And so for some people, they don't have a choice but to go to Mission Health, the HCA in downtown Nashville. But it's been interesting because what I will say is that we're starting to see, a lot of other hospitals pop up in the region trying to emerge in this market. And full transparency, I serve on the community board for Advent Health, which is right outside of Fletcher in Henderson County. And they've now got a new hospital they're building in Weaverville, which is just adjacent to Madison County to start to serve, those folk. And Weaverville, for folk that don't know, is in northern Buncombe County. And so that hospital is going to end up serving those folk in northern Buncombe County, but also in the rural areas of Madison County, because a lot of those folk, some of them have to drive to Tennessee to get care, right? And so, if I had to, sure, I would go to Mission. Would it be my first choice? Perhaps not. Just know the level of care, knowing how long I have to wait at the ER, and knowing that the argument that they're making is, hey, we said we were going to provide service, but we didn't say it was going to be good service. I don't think that's a place where I would want to be. And so, I mean, the big question here is, are they delivering on that promise? And then at the same time, when all this is happening, right, we've had these federal regulators stepping in with some pretty serious findings and what they call immediate jeopardy, which is the highest level warning that the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services can give out. So it's a pretty big deal. And it means essentially what they're saying is that the patients were at immediate risk of harm. Conditions, need to be fixed right away. And the hospital's federal funding could even be at a risk if it's not corrected, which, again, has some pretty major issues when we're talking about, really rural healthcare. So the Macon counties, the Transylvania counties. And then the biggest twist to me about all of this, they're still expanding, right? And so North Carolina has a certificate of need process where if a particular medical service is needed in the area, you have to apply to get a certain amount of beds or even, equipment for that matter. And so like down to our MRI machine, which to me is nonsense. I think if, a hospital needs an MRI machine, they should just be able to go purchase it. It's care. Perhaps there's an argument for the beds. I don't know. I'm not an expert in this space. But, they've just awarded some beds that they're going to be expanding their hospital, even more. And so those beds are being added, the first time in decades. There's competitors like Advent Health, Novant Health out of Charlotte, right. I think, and are in this area. They just got awarded some beds. And so there's some real questions around that. If they're saying, again, we're going to provide service, but we're not going to say it's going to be good service. There's some real concern around, if you're adding these beds, what's the service going to be? And is that fair to consumers and fair to patients here in West North Carolina? And so that's a high level overview about what's happening with ACA. So a lot of questions about healthcare in West North Carolina.
Yeah, no joke. And I mean, the first question you think of is like, would these people making these decisions want their loved ones to be in those beds, right? As you talk about the quality of care, the expansion of services, are we meeting the requirement and the muster that's required of these healthcare providers? I did look it up. It's, I think, the Hospital Corporation something.
Yeah, it sounds scary, man.
Yeah, Hospital Corporation of America. So it is interesting, but in this theme of just why do we have kind of corporate profit interests in healthcare in general? Is one of the questions, but also oftentimes, which is the case for so many policy points and pain points across this country, is like rural working people are the ones that are dealing with it the most, right? Like if you live in an urban area, like you're probably going to have a good hospital. I grew up right outside of Winston, and one of the best benefits of growing up, even though I grew up in a rural area, was if you got hurt, Wake Forest Baptist Health, like that's a pretty good hospital, right? And some people have bad experiences with it. I'm not saying they're perfect, but you compare that with some of these areas and it's night and day. And just because where you live doesn't mean that you shouldn't feel comfortable, taking your partner to the emergency room when they're delivering a child or, when you get an injury going somewhere, just basic kind of care. And I saw something actually similar with like I believe I read something about a Person County hospital and some of those pressures in that area, which, interesting dynamics all around. So what's your perspective as far as like, what more can leaders do? What would you say that folks in Raleigh or individuals could do to kind of get a grip on this situation? Because it is so localized, right? Because this is new to me. I'm like, what do you think is the path forward? Which is a big question for the Mayor Fletcher, I know.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how the lawsuit goes with our Attorney General, because I think that's really going to set the tone about how things begin to go forward. And, I think we see this trend when we see these big conglomerates, these big corporations, they get into these lawsuits and they end up losing. I mean, they're going to appeal it and they're going to appeal it and they're going to appeal it all the way up the chain until they can't go any further if they, get that far. And so I'm interested to see like what if they're found to not be providing the care that they promised to make, that they promised to deliver when they purchased the hospital. And so I think that's the real question. And so I'm hoping that the folk in Raleigh, so our Attorney General, Jeff Jackson, that they continue to have that push to put this pressure on ACA, continue to push forward the lawsuit and see what happens with that. And then locally, something interesting has happened just in the past week or so. In Atlanta Sky Regional Council, which is our council of government, covers 4 counties, so Madison, Buncombe, Henderson, and Transylvania County. I serve as a board delegate for the town of Fletcher. We recently passed a resolution asking Sam Hazen, I believe his name is, who's the CEO of HCA Healthcare, to come to West North Carolina to answer to some of the things that are happening with HCA because, care is declining. People are talking about it. People don't want to go to Mission. And there needs to be, at least in the eyes of Atlanta Sky Regional Council, some accountability and, some questions answered by this individual, because again, healthcare is declining pretty rapidly out here. And we're taking this resolution and we're taking it to each of our individual jurisdictions to hopefully pass it. We talked about it in Fletcher last night and we'll be passing it next week. And we're going to pass these resolutions and we're going to send them as a packet to HCA, and hopefully they'll be answering to us. And hopefully the CEO will come down and, answer the questions that folk in West North Carolina have. There's a lot of people that have been on the forefront, and healthcare to me should be a human right, and you shouldn't be scared to go to the hospital.
Well, for the folks listening, I mean, there's one, I'm so happy to hear you're doing that, and that's great work. And the thing I would underscore for people listening is that obviously us as local leaders don't have a lot of legislative authority to weigh in on healthcare matters, right? Like we can't really directly impact if healthcare is going to be more affordable or, kind of take on these folks. But resolutions and the bully pulpit and the platform that we have do hold great power. And it always kind of kills me when you see somebody running for local office and they're talking about things, well, we're going to give money to small businesses or, we're going to make healthcare affordable. And it's like, that's not really in your swim lane, but exactly what you're doing. Like, I think the folks in Western North Carolina are lucky they have local leaders that are saying, whatever we can do, being good ambassadors, messaging on this, and basically asking for answers. Like that's what you want a local leader to do in a situation that's fraught like this. And I'm sure that, this is only going to become worse. And so we're going to hear more stories like this as we see the cuts to Medicaid, as we see cuts in funding and subsidies because of things like the Big Beautiful Bill. And it probably hurts that we don't have a budget at the state level, too, to be honest with you, just kind of getting some funding to these rural areas.
Yeah, I mean, there's some real concerns. I mean, those rural hospitals really rely on Medicaid, Medicare funding. They're not getting those monies. I mean, they're at real risk for closing. And again, if they don't have healthcare right there, a lot of those folk are driving, maybe an hour out to get basic healthcare to, perhaps have a child, to deliver a baby. I mean, that's really risky for those folk. And it's a damn shame, I'll say.
Yeah. And we need a General Assembly that's aware of it, it's paying attention to these areas. And in that theme, wrapping up this first segment, we're going to talk next after the break a little bit about the newest senator that was just recently appointed to Senator Graig Meyer's seat. And kind of our takeaway, it's been really interesting watching that from afar, but we'll dive into that after the break. And thanks for catching us up on HCA, Preston.
Absolutely.
Okay, so for this segment, we're going to be talking a little bit about the newest North Carolina senator that's been appointed by a committee, 5 out of 6 votes, I believe, of the committee, as I read, to fill Graig Meyer's seat. And I want to state early and again that Graig Meyer is the founder of Beacon Media, which is an organization that partners with us to help produce this podcast. Doesn't mean that has been that informs any of this discussion, but believe in that transparency. And so, yeah, Jonah Garson, the next North Carolina senator. Initial thoughts, Preston? That's kind of been a fascinating thing to watch from Western North Carolina.
It's been a fascinating thing to watch, indeed. Well, first and foremost, congratulations to Senator Jonah Garson. I know Jonah's been involved in politics, Democratic politics, for quite a bit now, and so I truthfully wasn't sure how it was going to go. I know there was a couple people that were running for the position, and there came some controversies along the way. And so I saw a couple of news articles come out about Jonah that didn't put him in the best light. Some folk that are already in the General Assembly that spoke out against him. But I'm all about generally giving folk a chance. Not everybody deserves a chance, I think, but generally give folk a chance. So, I hope he does well in the General Assembly and big congrats to him. It was an interesting process to see play out. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I share a lot of that, and Jonah really campaigned for it. It was very visible for me, and I didn't actually realize who was running until I peeked around into it or who'd put their names in the hat. I guess you don't really run for that position, but my takeaway and your point about controversy is like you and I are both represented by Republicans pretty much the whole way up, with the exception of governor and attorney general. You and I have a very similar dynamic there. Our congresspersons are Republican, our senators, our North Carolina House rep, our North Carolina senator. And so this dynamic where there's kind of like a race within the party structure is so unique to the Triangle and like the Charlotte area. And it was almost foreign to me. Like I didn't even realize until recently I went to the Watauga County Democratic Party convention, and people are nominated to be on these replacement committees. I had no idea it was even a role because, we've not had a Democrat for some time representing us, much less one that would there were so many contenders that would put in, that were already elected or whatever. And so I've learned a lot just by watching it because it has been so high profile. And some of that mudslinging that you've talked about has elevated it even for me. That's way outside of the kind of target audience.
Yeah. And so for our listeners, do you mind to explain like what the process is for somebody to get appointed?
Yeah, so I might tell on myself, somebody from Chapel Hill might be listening and be like, that's not right. But my understanding is that at county conventions, in the same way that we nominate, party chairs and SEC members, SEC is the state executive committee, which kind of steers the Democratic Party. We also nominate and elect people that would be on a committee to replace a North Carolina senator or North Carolina House rep if they are the member of the same party. So, obviously the Republicans in Chapel Hill and Orange County and all those places aren't getting to pick the replacement for Graig. The Democrats are. And I would assume the Republicans have a very similar structure where they have these kind of officials that are appointed, but not totally sure. And so Jonah got 5 out of 6 of those required votes for that North Carolina Senate district of those people that were appointed. I can imagine one of the things I wonder what your perspective is on this, Preston. Do you think these people expected that? Because Graig Meyer's retirement was kind of a surprise, and like Graig's the man, right? Like Graig is, to me, one of the best elected officials this state's had in quite some time, and was a real leader in the Senate. But it's like, I think a lot of those people probably took that because they liked the title, and then boom, now you got to make a replacement, and it's kind of a polarizing race in some ways. I mean, some of the things that were coming out, I bet there was a lot of pressure that they probably didn't see coming.
Yeah, yeah. And Graig's been so incredibly successful in his tenure as an elected official because he spent some time in the House, made his way over to the Senate, right? And so he's been around for quite a long time and become incredibly influential. I mean, if you get on his Substack, his social media, people are really following him and interested in what this guy has to say. And so I will say is, and again, all props to Jonah. I hope he does really well. But losing Graig Meyer is a big loss for our state. And for the folk, I think, in the district that he represents, because I think he truly cares for those folk. And so I think it probably was a surprise that he left. And I think it was probably also a surprise, how at least it was to me. And again, we're coming from West North Carolina, where we're represented by all Republicans. I mean, I'm like you, it was like foreign to me. And so it was a surprise to see like how contentious it was, because which is surprising because, you're going in there as a Democrat, being in, the minority, not a whole lot of expectation to get things done, and Raleigh without the support of the folk across the table, and in all reality, besides, a lot of local stuff. And so, local and bipartisan things, but I'm shocked that Graig left, and I'm shocked about how just divisive and ugly it ended up being. Because again, like that just wouldn't happen here, because we don't have a shot in hell and going to the North Carolina Senate or the North Carolina House. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think the one lesson that I would say to anybody that is in the General Assembly is that Graig was a great messenger, and that's the only advantage you have when you're in the minority, right? We don't have a budget pass, like you said. It takes a lot to get done, anything done in the minority in this current General Assembly, and it's like Graig was willing to communicate, to message, to build this platform, to really elevate, I think, key values that we should have and not shy away from them. And I hope that these folks in these safe Democratic areas, people that have the privilege to be able to apply for these vacancies, use the fact that they're in a safe district, use the fact that they have this audience, instead of maybe all the infighting, which there's some mystery there we don't know about at all, like message. Like there's Prestons and Daltons out west that would love a North Carolina senator or North Carolina House rep that would be willing to talk to us too, even though we're out of district, or be willing to message on things like HCA that we talked about earlier in this episode. And so that's the lesson I really want folks to continue to kind of carry on from Graig, which is when you're in the minority, you have the advantage to be a good messenger for the values that really matter and should be winning us elections, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that was the point I was going to make about HCA. I mean, it's like us out in West North Carolina doing these resolutions to really point out about the bad behavior from HCA and, call out some things. I mean, you have the power to really have a bully pulpit, and argue and message around things that really, matters to the constituents and the residents that you serve, and the values that you represent as an elected official. One of the things that I have been thinking about as the appointment process went on was I think the lack of a bench that we have as Democrats in North Carolina. I think it's hard for me to wrap my mind around like people from the General Assembly that are going to make that next jump from the General Assembly to, perhaps Council of State or, Congress or, whatever they may want to do, or maybe have the qualities and know how to do. And so I did think that part was really critical. Like, I want somebody that is not only going to be a skilled legislator, but, might also have some upward mobility to do something, really great. I mean, I think about like, Roy Cooper from, Nash County. And again, Nash County and Orange County are wildly different. But, Roy Cooper went on from Nash County to being, a state senator, attorney general, governor, and now maybe a U.S. senator. And so I also want somebody that's incredibly skilled for not just a job there, but maybe a job in the future too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it makes me think of this story, and I wasn't serving at this time, but Boone was working really hard on getting a water intake. It's a big debacle. And Josh Stein, who was the then North Carolina senator, actually kind of adopted the town of Boone because our senator back then didn't want to work with us at all and was very antagonistic of the town being a Republican. And actually pushed for us in Raleigh to get this key piece of infrastructure and in a way almost adopted Boone. Which gives me a lot of respect for him and his background as a legislator back when he was in the General Assembly, and makes me think like, yeah, that type of person is, I think, how you build this profile to one day run for that state office and build that bench out, and versus just kind of staying in your place. And I am amazed at. We've got a lot of great Democratic legislators. I'm not trying to go after them at all, but I think very few people are messaging and meeting the moment and being kind of aggressive and looking at what's going around the state and communicating that. Not to say there aren't some doing it, but we could always use more. And so you're right. Like, it builds out the bench, it gets your name out there. And again, if we believe that our values are the values that are going to win, which I do, right? And I believe they're the values that benefit my community. Like, every chance we get, we got to communicate on it. We got to communicate why this matters, and introduce legislation to make the Republicans say no or not hear it, to put them in that place.
Yeah, and I love the story about Josh Stein adopting y'all's community. I mean, that's incredible. And that's the type of person that you want serving North Carolina, serving our state. I mean, I think about a similar situation that I had where Lindsey Prater, who's a state rep up in Buncombe County, I was texting her and I was like, hey, my state reps and state senators, they're trying to change my election cycle. And I was like, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And, Lindsay texted me a couple of days later and she's like, hey, it's in committee right now. What do you want me to say? And I told her what I wanted her to say, like what my values were, what I cared about. And again, this is a state rep in Buncombe County, which is north of me. She's right beside me, but doesn't represent me at all, but was willing, to make that jump to say, hey, there are folk in this community that don't want this to happen. They do not want their election cycles changed. And so just having the ability to, really, and we do this as mayors, I think, all the time. People ask me questions, ask me to do things that aren't specific to Fletcher, right? And so there are things that are like, in Buncombe County and in Henderson County and unincorporated areas and Henderson, like everywhere. And again, like, we're public servants and we have to show up to, really figure out how to be problem solvers and, help these folk out that reach out to us. And I'm hoping Jonah does that same thing, right? Because that matters. And I think, again, to your point about Greg's voice as a messenger, I mean, it's even down to the messaging, right? The messaging reached me in Henderson County, all the way on the other side of the state, right? And so that all matters. And so I say all that to say, I guess I'm going to miss Graig Meyer. Love that guy.
Yeah. I'm going to miss Graig too. And I will say, for the folks listening, he will be a guest on the show. So looking forward to chatting with him and hearing as he reflects on his service. And I think Preston said it best. Like, we're wishing Jonah Garson luck. Congratulations. Recognizing some of the contentious nature of the race, and some of the hesitations have been voiced by folks in the Senate. And I just hope that we can work to build some consensus and just recognize, like, we got to meet this moment however we can. And there's opportunities to do that. So it's been fun to watch it from afar. And who knows, maybe one day when we're grandpas on a porch, there will be a Senate replacement for a Democrat in Watauga County or out in Henderson.
Maybe Henderson County. Maybe one day it's coming.
You never know. Well, next, as in talking about the embattled nature, we're going to talk a little bit about some controversies of the show, kind of being on panels, the kind of public role that we're in, less in the news reign, but just a little bit of sharing about Preston and I's own experiences. So stick around, and we'll talk to you after the break.
Welcome back, everybody. My name is Preston Blakely. I'm the mayor of the town of Fletcher on one half of the Do You Even Live Here podcast. Here are my co-host, Dalton George, the mayor of Boone, the other half of the Do You Even Live Here podcast. And we're here to talk about controversy now. You know, we just finished talking about Jonah Gorson, and unfortunately, there was some mudslinging, some controversy. And now we're going to talk about, you know, some of the controversies that have come up as we've been doing this podcast, y'all. It happens. It comes out of nowhere. We recently had my good buddy, Andrew Iden, on the podcast. And while Andrew was on the podcast, he told a lot of glamorous, really cool stories about his time in DC and all the people he's met. And he worked with a lot of people that were intimately involved in the civil rights movement, a lot of just incredible Black folk that I look up to and, you know, hold in the highest regard. So talking like Jesse Jackson and John Lewis. And during one of his stories, I believe he did maybe a voice to that was supposed to be maybe John Lewis's voice or Jesse Jackson's voice. I can't remember whose.
It was John Lewis, yeah.
It was John Lewis's voice. And again, folks, you know, Andrew Iden worked with John Lewis for over a decade. And John Lewis considered him to be a son. And Andrew considered John Lewis to be like a father to him. You know, Andrew didn't grow up with his father, not to tell his personal business too much. He didn't grow up with his father. So, you know, John Lewis really took him under his wing. They wrote books together, you know, National Book Award winners, New York Times bestsellers. I mean, they were incredibly close. And, you know, quite frequently, I was talking with Andrew about this just over the weekend, quite frequently they would go around and, you know, they would tell these stories about their shenanigans and the things they were getting into on the Hill and in their personal life. And when they would tell these stories, Andrew would use this preacher kind of voice that, you know, kind of sounded like John Lewis. And John Lewis would do this voice too. If y'all have ever read Andrew's and Representative Lewis's books, there's a part in the book where John Lewis is preaching to chickens. So this was something that he did. And he would use the voice, right? John Lewis would use his voice, so Andrew would use his voice, and it was a regular thing to do. And it was never a controversy until recently. What happened, Dalton?
Yeah, that's such a great tee up. And I will just say, like, on the philosophy of controversy, you know, there's this inherent irony as elected officials of being so candid and talking in long form. And for so long, you know, the generation of public servants and politicians before you and I, Preston, the attitude was the less you talk, the better, right? You always want to stick to the script. Be careful what you say to the press. They might report it. I mean, that's kind of the attitude and still the attitude of a lot of elected officials. Like, let's be honest, right? I think you and I take a risk by talking long form, right? There's always something somebody can pull out of context or hold over us. And so, I was on the call with a constituent, a local business owner, younger guy, and we talked for like an hour and was trying to help him. And he kind of, I guess, was sitting on this like bomb that he wanted to drop related to the Andrew episode. And we get done talking and he's like, I have a bone to pick with you, essentially. And I asked what that was. And he told me, you know, he thought it was really insensitive that we had a podcast where we were mocking a Black guy. He said it just like that. And I was so like stunned because that's, you know, I mean, there's just a lot of dynamics of that phrasing, right? That made me go, well, what are you even talking about? And he pointed out the clip that we had posted on our Instagram. Do you even live here? @ Do you even live here? Follow us. Do you even live here pod? Follow us on Instagram. So that's where the controversy started. And he said that it was really offensive to see two white guys laughing and mocking a Black guy. And you know, that's a big allegation to throw at somebody, you know, to mock John Lewis. And I tried to provide some context and say, well, exactly what you said, you know, it wasn't really making fun of John Lewis, was telling a story. You know, this is somebody who's very close with him that wrote 3 books. And you would think that most people would go, oh, okay, well, I missed that piece, but this young man doubled down. He started hollering, he, you know, continued. And And then I found out, Preston, that actually we were a white-only show. That's what he let me know. He said, you have a show with just two white guys joking around about a black guy, and that doesn't look very good. So
this is the first I've heard about this. I didn't know I wasn't black. I didn't know.
Yeah, so that, and I tried to explain, hey, my co-host is young black Mayor Fletcher, good friend of mine. Not that, not that that's, I'm not doing the white guy thing. Oh, I have a black friend, right? But just saying that there's some context that you might be missing if you view the show as being a white only show. And this might help. It did not help. And so the call actually ended with this individual being very animated, screaming at me, and it kind of emotionally activated me. And that's kind of why I said, hey, I want to talk a little bit about controversy, because I think the thing that we have to deal with as elected officials, like when things come, it's like, that's an attack on my character, and it actually upset me because I really try to take what constituents say seriously and, and internalize it and not brush it off. I think the worst politicians out there are these ones that build the shell. And the attitude is everybody on the other side of this role doesn't really know anything, so I'm not paying attention. But the reality is sometimes you get some flack for some silly things. And so that's my Andrew story on controversy. And I think, I actually called you after and was like, hey, Preston, can we chat?
Yeah, I think that was the exact adjective you used. You like, man, I'm activated right now. I'm like, dude, are you okay? Like, what happened? It's like, I don't know if you're hurt. If you are hurt, don't go to ACA Nashville.
Exactly.
But yeah, but controversy it happens, and I think it happens when it deserves to happen, right? But two, when a lot of silly things happen, and I think people's emotions are at the highest they can be. It happens then, right?
Right.
I'm not sure if I've ever told you like my sweatpants controversy. I think I might have talked about it on the podcast before. But for those that don't know, I'm a bit of a gym rat, and so in my spare time when I go to the grocery store and when I go to out to eat, hanging out, whatever. A regular guy, like I don't wear a suit everywhere I go to. You're
not lifted in a suit. Are you serious? You're not a mayor. You're not lifted in a suit. That's ridiculous.
I'm not lifted in a suit. I'm not going to the grocery store in a suit.
Right.
I wear sweatpants, and right after Helene, I think this is to the point of people's emotions are really activated, and people are living like their worst moments of their lives. There's a guy that was pretty upset with me. He was like, well. They posted a picture of me and Governor Cooper at the time, former Governor Cooper. He visited us in Fletcher, and we were talking about the things that we needed for recovery. And in the photo, I had on, I think maybe some green khakis, and somebody in the comments was like, well, there were a couple of people that were like, this is just a photo op for the mayor. Looks pretty good for him. And then there was one that I like to poke fun of myself. I think it's pretty funny. They're like, this is the first time I'm not seeing the man in sweatpants. And I'm like, where did you see me at? Because I don't go to council meetings in sweatpants or meetings in sweatpants, And so that was my mini controversy during Hurricane Helene. But, to your point, I think when you were talking to your constituent, he was trying to get some support for something, and he was frustrated. His emotions were really high, and, perhaps that played a role here. But I think it was really interesting. I guess his point about the voice being insensitive, because when I think about insensitivity and mocking Black folk, I don't think about somebody that you've worked intimately with, again, that you consider a father for over a decade. But I do think, like, we're talking about race, like using the N-word, right? That's inappropriate. We've seen a lot of politicians get caught up in that, and being in blackface, that's controversial. Like that's a
or using a black accent, right? Using a black accent to mock Black people generally is not cool, right?
That's right. And so all of those things are those are real controversies, right? And so I think what happened in your case, I'm not sure if we were equating it to a black accent or blackface, but I don't think it's valid, right? I mean, it doesn't have that same power, that same history, that same you know,
and this guy was a white guy. I think that's important to state, right? Like, I think the dynamic would be a little bit different. I mean, but I think that's also important to underscore there too.
This isn't something that was rooted in racism, right?
Yeah.
This wasn't something that was rooted in racism. It wasn't like blackface that was designed to like, you know, humiliate black folk, to, you know, hold this power over us, to make, you know, these harmful stereotypes that, you know, that depict black people as, you know, these really harmful things like lazy, ignorant, all the things, right? That didn't happen.
Well, and you know, the one thing I want to underscore, and this is so relevant because we had just released the PD episode. Encourage y'all to listen to that. It's on wherever you find podcasts. You even live here, but we were talking about how to be funny as elected officials, and there's a risk in being funny, right? And like even Andrew's story was actually a funny story, right? If you listen to the context of it, it's about how Congress really doesn't get the lesson in the same way that preaching to chickens, they don't get the lesson. There's some humor in that, and as we talked to PD about like how do we use humor to communicate to people and recognize that regular people respond well to humor. And like, even with our April Fool's Day post, right? Like you had that great, and I'll let you tell your story and I'll tell mine. I just got a comment. I did this very cute thing. We're renaming Blowing Rock Road to Boontown Road. And some guy literally commented and he was saying, this isn't a good idea. It literally says April Fool's in bold. Coming from other states doesn't mean SHIT to us. It will stay Blowing Rock Road, and you can kiss my tail. Another word for tail that's a little bit more creative on that B words. Okay, so this guy's very upset, and it's like, man, I'm just kidding around. And I know that there's moments for levity and there's moments to, you know, to be serious as an elected official. I'm not saying we come up and we do stand up at a council meeting, but it's a way that we can connect to our community and tell stories. And there will always be people, as long as you deviate from what it is like to be that stereotypical politician. And so many people say we want more than the stereotypical politician. But the moment you get a young guy that shows up in sweats, the moment you get young guys that want to talk about what's important to them and tell stories, the moment you get some young guys that want to do an April Fool's post, there's going to be a couple people, not all. I think most people respond really well to it. They go, hey, you're not in a suit and you're not sticking to the script. You're a little bit out of your lane. You're a little bit out of coverage. And to me, that's offensive or upsets me. And it's unfortunate, but I think we continue to try to shift the window and make people recognize if you're the Mayor Fletcher or Mayor Boone, chances are you're a regular person. And you laugh at the same things your neighbors laugh at. And you want to tell stories. You want to connect people. You go to the gym in the same way people do. You have a beer at the end of the day. And that type of stuff.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I had I guess a little bit of controversy, not much. I think everybody understood my April Fool's joke, but again, there's always a few stragglers. And I think
what was your April Fool's joke? Because it was so good.
Okay, so it was, and again, shout out. I have to tell everybody the story. So, like the day before April Fool's Day, I'm talking to my wonderful, handsome co-host, Mayor Boone Dalton George, and he's telling me about his April Fool's joke, and like, Preston, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I've never done April Fool's before. And Dalton, you just start spitballing. He's like, hey, isn't the airport in Asheville, but it has a Fletcher address? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you need to say that, you know, you're renaming the airport the Fletcher Regional Airport. And I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty funny idea. And so I type up this fake press release just as you did, and help from one of our Do You Even Live Here staff members, shout out to her, made some logos, and we put them online, and we said that, or I said I was going to annex the Asheville Regional Airport and change its name to the Fletcher Regional Airport. And it was a hit. I mean, people thought it was hilarious.
Just baller. The people that get it. I mean, it's so good.
People that get it. I mean, so, and here's the thing. We haven't talked about this yet, I don't think, but I heard through the grapevine, right, that apparently somebody printed out my press release and was taping it up at the airport. Wasn't me, to be clear, but
they got the joke.
They got the joke. And so apparently it was printed out and posted in the airport. Somebody told me they were flying in. They saw the press release in the airport and they were like, what the hell? And I was like, I didn't think it was going to go that far. But on one of my posts, one guy was upset. He was like, don't poke the bear. This is only going to hurt blue collar folks and make our taxes go up. And again, you and I talked about this. The ironic thing is that it will actually probably make our taxes go down. But that's neither here nor there. Had a little bit of a controversy there. And then I felt bad for the guy because I go back in the comments on my post, and like people are like just ragging on him, and I'm like, that's not great. And
Yeah.
so I go back a little bit later. He deleted his comment, and I was like, yeah. And I tried to save the guy because I don't want to see anybody get cyber bullied.
You
And
were very
I,
nice. Yeah, you said,
I
"Hey, man, I think you misread," and yeah,
yeah. I don't want to see anybody get cyber bullied over a joke. But people got in the comments and were pushing back against them, and they said, "I don't think you've ever smiled a day in your life." But I'm sure this guy smiles all the time. I don't know.
yeah.
But anyways, I think it speaks to some of the risks that we take is trying to be funny and really trying to
Yeah.
change the dynamic that we have as elected officials in this really non-traditional way. Like we want to be able to have long form content. We want to be able to joke around. We
Right.
want to be able to be out there and really connect with folk in a way that historically that we haven't.
Well, in the heart of it, right, is like I want to be myself. That's like I want
I
to
want
be
to
the
be
mayor. I
myself.
want to serve for my community, but I also want to be myself. And I think a lot of people have minimized themselves or tried not to be authentic because that's the best practice. And it stops. You wouldn't have gotten that Facebook comment if you didn't make that joke. I wouldn't have gotten mine, right? I wouldn't be getting
Yeah.
a call from a constituent, making a pretty serious allegation if we weren't doing long form content. But I want to be myself. I want to do what's fun, and I think that's what we need. I think we need people that are honest, that are authentic, and so if you get a little controversy, it's nice to have a show where you can unpack it with your pals. And I know that we've got one more segment. This has been Do You Even Live Here? Talking a little bit about controversy with Dalton George, the Mayor Boone, and Preston Blakely, the Mayor Fletcher. Next, we'll be talking about North Carolina's favorite pastime, March Madness, and the end of the tournament. So stick around.
And as we talk about March Madness, shout out to Dalton George, who just got accepted to Duke's Masters program. And I will say that Duke got eliminated yet again, and they did not win a national championship. I think it's been 11 years since they've won a national championship. Looking forward to talking about it. All right, and we are back with our next segment of Do You Even Live Here? My name is Preston Blakely. I'm one half of Do You Even Live Here? And I'm the mayor of the town of Fletcher. I'm here with my buddy Dalton George, who's the mayor of Boone, and my other half of Do You Even Live Here podcast. And as we were closing out our last segment, I was giving Dalton a hard time. But again, big congrats to Dalton. He's going to Duke. And they did not win a national championship again. I don't even think they made it did they make it to the Final Four?
No,
they did,
no,
right?
They did not.
No, they did.
No, I think they got bounced in the Elite Eight. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so you're just being.
I'll just give you, yeah. Yeah. I'll have to give you a hard time. I know they didn't make it. But hey, I'm a UNC fan. They went out first round, which is tough to watch. But on the other end of that coin, we also don't consistently get top 10 recruits to our institution like Duke does. And I don't think we have that same expectation like you all and go on an 11-year drought of going to the national championship. We're not on that same drought. Hubert Davis made it in his first year, and we can talk about Hubert Davis too. But shout out to Michigan. They won the national championship last night, which I think
boring game. Actually,
yeah,
I thought it was boring.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it was our first national championship since the Fab Five, if I'm not mistaken, in the '90s. And a former Tar Heels on that team. So congrats to him. Dalton, did you make a bracket?
Did not make a bracket. I will tell on myself, I'm a bad North Carolinian. I grew up in a Tar Heel household. My grandparents loved the Tar Heels and never really got into college ball. I actually have always kind of been endeared to Duke because I feel like they're the villains of the college basketball apparatus in North Carolina, which I've always kind of been endeared to. Yeah, it's like I've always kind of been like, oh, that's cool. Never watched a ton this year because of the news, like you said, me getting into Duke and them offering pretty substantial scholarship. I was like, you know what, it's a good year to watch. They're in the tourney this year. I've always kind of had it on in the background, but I'm going to become an active fan. And that UConn game was, I rolled it out. You got to lean into it every now and then. And the UConn game was ridiculous. That's actually, I think I'm half the reason they won lost because it's very true to me and my luck as a sports fan because that half court shot was really dumb. I remember watching that and just being awestruck that was real, that even happened, that could happen.
Yeah. Well, it reminded me of, and I want to say this was the 2016 championship, perhaps. and I think UNC was in that championship game.
Yeah.
And Villanova hit that big buzzer beater, which was just heartbreaking. So it reminded me of that, but it felt better because it was Duke.
But do you not dislike UConn? I mean, UConn is a pretty easy team to dislike too.
I do, but it doesn't have the same. It doesn't have the same relevance and rival. Okay. Yeah, it is. It's the hate, man. I'm not gonna lie. I'm hating heavy right now. It's the hate. Get it. But I will say this: there's a lot of Duke players that I have a lot of big respect for. When we were on the break, we were talking about Charlotte Hornets basketball. And we have our boy. He's my boy now since he's on the Hornets. No longer, he's still a Dookie, but my boy going crazy. Con Kneppel, who I think just broke the 3-point record, the Hornets 3-pointers made in a season record as a rookie. Which is nuts.
Yeah.
And he was on Duke's basketball team along with Cooper Flagg, and they did not win a championship. Just throw that out there too.
Listen, I will say this too, though, because I've watched the NBA a lot longer than I've watched. Like, I've been a more active fan of the NBA than I have college basketball. And to the folks listening, if you're in North Carolina, this is an invite from the two mayors of Fletcher and Boone. Start watching the NBA because the Hornets right now have a lot of things going for them. You got Kobe White, who of course went to Chapel Hill. You've got Con, who went to Duke. You got a fun young team. LaMelo Ball, obviously, who's kind of famous or infamous because of the Ball family, but is a certified hooper. It's a great time to be a Hornets fan. It's an exciting time to be a Hornets fan. And what school did because there's two people that are in the running to be Rookie of the Year, and there's really nobody else that's even close. Both of those guys went to the same university, did they not? Where was that? Did they go?
It was Duke University where they did not win the championship together.
That's interesting. I didn't realize they went to Duke.
But listen, the two leading rookies for Rookie of the Year, again,
not even close,
and did not win a championship. Let's make that clear. And did not win a championship.
And Cooper Flagg's Cooper Flagg's incredible. He really is. I really don't know what the player comparison of Cooper Flagg is. Like he's kind of He's an entity unto himself. He is.
I think he dropped a 50-piece the other night too, which again for a rookie is crazy. I mean, there's players that have been in the league for years and have never even gotten close to 50 points, right? I mean, I think to score 20 points or 30 points in the NBA consistently is a tough thing to do. But to drop 50 in a given game, I mean, it's crazy. And also on that topic, Bam Adebayo, listen, was it 83 points, I think?
Yeah.
I'm not mad at it. Listen, there are haters out there, and I've been hating heavy in this segment. I'm not hating on it. Bam's from North Carolina, y'all. He's from North Carolina. And
I did not know that, actually.
He's from North Carolina. And to score 83 points in a game, I mean, whether they're free throws, whether they're, 3-pointers, I don't think it matters. Actually, I'm lying. He's from Newark, New Jersey, but he grew up in North Carolina. Looks like he went to Northside High School in Pinetown, North Carolina, and then High Point Christian Academy in High Point. So he shouts out North Carolina a lot. Love that.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I don't think you can hate him for it. I mean, if anybody would have been like, don't be soft and take him out, it would have been Kobe, as we talk about that. Like this idea that you should never try to break a record. Obviously what happened there is a tragedy, but it's, come on. They're all competitors, right? Let them play. Let them go for the next. Nobody will probably ever break Wilt's 100. But I guess shifting back to college basketball, because I'm curious, Preston, you're a Chapel Hill fan. You've outed yourself in that way. Hubert Davis is gone, which I actually, from the outside, think is a pretty terrible decision. But the replacement was recently named not too long ago, Mike Malone, formerly head coach of the Nuggets in the NBA. So it kind of marries the two topics we were just talking about.
Yeah. I almost have big feelings about this. I have good feelings, I have bad feelings. I didn't like the Hubert Davis firing. We were talking about the Dean Smith coaching tree. We just dismantled it. We just obliterated it. It's not the Carolina family anymore. Or maybe it is a little bit. I think I just saw Mike Malone's daughter plays volleyball at UNC. Yeah. So maybe not that same coaching tree, but at least he does have some UNC connection. And if he's going to win some games, we're not mad at that, right? He won a championship with the Denver Nuggets. and that's great. No, I think he's a really well-respected coach, and I think he's probably going to do a good job at UNC. But I'm not sure that Hubert Davis deserved to be fired so soon. I mean, I don't know, man. His first season, he took UNC to a championship. Maybe got booted in the first round, I think 2 years in a row now.
Yeah.
But look, he's winning games. He really is. He's in the regular season.
Caleb Wilson was hurt.
And Caleb Wilson was hurt. That was going to be my next point. I mean, our top player was our best player was hurt. And that takes a lot out of a team, right? And so I'm not sure that it was quite his time to be fired, but I was talking with over the weekend, I had an event. I was talking with my buddy. I say he's my buddy. He's older than I am, but we're friends. He played football at UNC, and he lives in Hendersonville. And I was like, "Hey, man, what do you think about the firing?" And he was like, "Oh, man, I don't think he deserved it. I don't think he was ready." And I was like, "Well, why do you think it happened?" And he said it was he thought it was a mixture of things between Carolina just not being patient and feeling like they're not winning the games that they need to be winning. Because again, Caleb was out. It hurts to go out in the first round, but again, that's where it matters. I mean, that's where it matters. That's where you win the championship. And then the other thing he said was he didn't think that Hubert did any favors during the press conference that he had, which I'm not sure exactly what he's referencing. I need to go watch the press conference. So if our listeners know about this press conference that happened where this person thinks that Hubert didn't do himself any favors, I like to hear about it. I need to go watch that. But then like the other point, sometimes it's like black folk are held to a really tough standard. And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like he, perhaps if his identity was different, perhaps he would have got another chance, and perhaps, he would still be the head coach at Carolina, but he's not. We're welcoming Mike Malone in. We're excited to have him. And I say we like I'm on the basketball staff, but I'm excited he's there. And I hope Hubert finds somewhere that's a good fit for him where he's still able to influence the game of basketball somewhere, because I think people like Hubert Davis are needed in this world. So he has all the flowers from
Sounds
the
like
little mayor of Fletcher.
Sounds like a sad breakup. I'm like cry at what you're saying right now. I will say it's funny that you bring that up about the race dynamic, because I have a friend, he listens to this show, young white guy, but he actually double graduated from Chapel Hill. So he got his undergrad and master's there. Huge Chapel Hill basketball fan, traveled all around to see them back when he was there. And he said the same thing. He said he was defending Hubert in the group chat. And he was like, look, if Hubert was a young white guy, that he would still be here. That he felt, very definitively that there is kind of this different race dynamic, especially among coaches. Really in major sports in general, we've seen kind of a lot of black coaches feel like they get axed a lot quicker than white coaches, or maybe given less grace. But the death of the Dean Smith coaching tree is wild. And I mean, Mike Malone isn't Bill Belichick. We said that, as in he's probably not going to be as bad or a media circus as Belichick has. But you got to think those are the same people that made that decision. So I hope, for the sake of the rivalry between my new university, Duke and Chapel Hill, that y'all can keep it in the road and get it together. But it's kind of a scary spot to be in. Again, this is like, you're kind of out in the water without floaties for the first time, without that Dean Smith connection, and that kind of stability that the program has offered for so long.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mike Malone is a well-respected coach, especially at the professional level. I mean, I don't think there's a player in the NBA that would say they don't want to be coached by this individual. I mean, he's respected. He knows what he's doing. I think he's like, it's like Dan Hurley over in UConn. I mean, people respect the guy. Like they want to be coached by him. They think he's a good coach. And so I think Mike Malone brings that same presence. And I'm also interested to see like how he makes his transition from professional basketball to college basketball, because there's a difference, right? And so you're not and I think that difference I think that gap is closing a whole lot with the influence of NIL money and endorsements, and these players essentially signing contracts to go play college basketball. I think it's changing a little bit, but it's still a wildly different dynamic. So I'm always interested to see how professional coaches make this transition from the pro level to the college level.
Yeah. And you're so right. I mean, it's blurring together. And I mean, I don't know how I feel about it. There's so many complicated feelings about the NIL money and all of these things. And obviously, it's her App State football. This Luke Combs clip came out. And I'm not going to lie, like, it's nice to see your alma mater win. I do have some concerns about App State football just being a little tough on the town and our services and residents. And I've often complained about that publicly. But, that program feels like it's pretty much over now, right? Like there's like the prospect of having a solid football team is a long shot. And that angle, but also it's like, these athletes generate so much money for the universities. You look at the kids that were going to Duke a couple of years ago before, and it's like the amount of money they were generating for these programs while not really making anything except getting the potential to go to the league was kind of unfair. And so it's a really tough balance. And you like a more kind of competitive field, but sports is so ever evolving. And also a world where it's like two head coaches that had won titles. I mean, like Belichick, obviously multi Super Bowl winner as a coach, but now has went to college, and Mike Malone won the chip with the Nuggets and went to college. And it's like that would have never happened before they really just kind of opened the floodgates of this money. I mean, you would have never heard tell of something like that.
Yeah, man. I think about and again, I'm a alum of UNC Greensboro undergrad and Western Carolina for my master's, and I think about UNCG's coach. We had we crossed over for a little bit of our time at UNCG, and he coached after I graduated, Wes Miller, and he was a winner at UNCG. I mean, we won conference championships. We made I think 2 tournament appearances. One of the tournament appearances, we almost upset Gonzaga. If you haven't seen some of those clips, definitely look it up. I mean, I think it was within just a handful of points. And the guy Coach Miller ended up getting, and this is before like all the big NIL money, he ended up getting a contract to go coach at Cincinnati. And at Cincinnati, he had, somewhat success. But this year he ended up getting let go, and now he's been named the coach of UNC Charlotte. And a lot of people were upset when he was fired from Cincinnati because they said he didn't have the same resources that he needed to really compete to get those, get those contracts with that NIL money to, really recruit the best and the brightest players to play, under him at Cincinnati. And they didn't think he had a fair shot at it. And so I'm always really interested in like the mid and major division ones, because like, how are they ever competitive again, like in a real way? Like, I think about App State. I mean, powerhouse in football, right? It's like, how do they ever get back to that same glory without having that money? It's tough.
Yeah. And I mean, money's the name of the game. Another affluent university. We'd be remiss if we didn't shout them out, being a North Carolina podcast. High Point University. Look at them. They were and kind of a sleeper pick to make it to the second round. I think. Did they win the first round? Very interesting team this year, and pretty cool that we had a number of North Carolina teams in the tournament. I feel like we all do better when we all do better. I want to see more North Carolina teams. UNCG. It'd be great to see App State one day. That'd be really cool. So, there's some options, and the basketball state continues to reign, and we'll see how Duke does next year. Maybe you and I could put a friendly wager, let the public know, we've bet on our college teams.
We'll
bragging rights, of course.
Yeah. And to your point, I'll be glad if any North Carolina team wins, but just a little bit less glad if it's Duke.
Well, this has been Do You Even Live Here? We've talked about a number of things today. I'll go ahead and hit those topics real quick just to kind of get the episode consistent. We talked about HCA, which is a hospital out in Henderson County, and the struggles they've been encountering. Talked a little bit about the Senate replacement for Senator Graig Meyer, and now been named Jonah Garson, who will be filling that seat, and kind of the unique dynamics there. We talked a little bit about our own personal controversies, the dynamics of being elected and candid and trying to communicate with people in the way that you would your friends, right? Then we finished talking about March Madness, college basketball, a little bit about why Preston thinks Duke is better than Chapel Hill. Talked a little bit about everything. I'm kidding. I won't do that to you. And this has been Do You Even Live Here, right? A show about North Carolina, rural places, really trying to shine a light on things that we feel like matter as two young elected leaders. So I'm Dalton George, the mayor of Boone. My co-host, I'll let you say your name, Preston.
Yeah, glad. Thank y'all for listening. Preston Blakely, the Mayor of Fletcher.
Yeah, and next we'll have a guest. So thanks for tuning in, y'all, and take care.